I'll be very upfront to see that number to start with. I was like, no freaking way is someone going to pay me that. I think it was like $300 and something an hour. I was like, no way. I feel like, this is like what doctors charge, what lawyers charge, those sorts of things. And I was incredibly uncomfortable with it. I was like, I must have done something wrong here. I've got to recheck my equations, all these sorts of things. And eventually I just I had to put that number out there, and I was like, I'm going to get knocked back 100%. I was like, should I was discounting in my head. I was negotiating myself down before I'd even put something in front of the client. And eventually I was just like, I'm just going to put the number out there and see what happens. And I got it. I got the job. I got my first job. And that for me was like, okay, I've got to stop questioning my worth or not let my head try to talk me out of doing something that on paper and in every other way looks like the right thing to do.
You're listening to the Modern People Leader podcast, where we go behind the scenes with today's top HR leaders and work experts. We talk to them about how they've gotten to where they're at, what they do every day, and what they see coming next for the future of work. Hope you enjoy.
I have literally been waiting for this part of the day to come all day long. This is by far going to be the best part of my day, probably the best part of my week. Matt McFarlane, how you doing? Welcome back to the Modern People Leader.
I'm good. Excited to be here. Good to see you guys again.
So we have a lot. We need to have a podcast about the conversations right before recording the podcast, Daniel, because there's always like magic happening right before. And we were just talking about all the great things that we were going to cover today. And so, I want to get to all that. But before we do, as you know, we have some rituals and traditions at the Modern People Leader that we'd like to kick off with. First is good news stories, personal work-related story from the last week or two, just a way to kick things off with some positivity. And Matt, we prefer you go first.
Yeah, well, I was the same before. I have the great fortune of living in a small seaside town, and I normally have the pleasure of going for a walk on the beach this morning. And I came prepared thinking like, oh yeah, I've got this win, but I got to see dolphins this morning. So, I'm just going to take that. That's my win.
That's pretty good. I can't beat
dolphins.
Yeah.
Steven, you want to go next?
Yeah, I am going to go with work. And I think this has been good news for me for the last few podcasts, but it still remains good news. MPL Live Toronto is our next location for our marquee event. This year we're expanding events. So we're doing not just MPL Lives, but we're doing dinners and conferences and virtual events. But by far my favorite is the big one, the main event, which is MPL Live, which will be in Toronto next. We're also going to be in London and San Francisco this year. But Toronto, man, there is just like so much energy. So we now have all of our panelists booked. We may be oversubscribed on panelists. We added a new programming segment called the Future of Work Face-Off. We did it for the first time in Austin. People loved it. We take an MPL All-Star, someone who's been on the show. We pair him against an up-and-coming HR leader challenger. We also have almost fully subscribed. I think we have one spot in all of the programming for MPL Live Toronto left to fill. So super exciting. Some great names. I'm not going to steal the thunder from Regina and the posts, which she'll be communicating, but that's my good news, is it's been a great week on the programming side for MPL Live Toronto.
It has. I mean, for MPL Live Toronto, like overall, I feel like we've made a lot of progress this week.
Yeah.
My good news is that, and it's going to be like kind of nerdy, like on the marketing side, but, for the most part, at the Modern People Leader, everything that we've done had all of the growth that we've had on the podcast, on social, on our email newsletter has all been organic. So people either find us on Google or through ChatGPT or through a LinkedIn post, and that's gotten us pretty far. We've been able to build a decent sized following, and it's worked, but we've finally reached the point where we need a new growth lever, and we've now been looking into paid social, specifically paid meta ads. and I'm excited. Like I'm a marketer, and so I'm excited to test out the new audiences and all of the new features. Like I've been away from this stuff for I don't know 4 years now, and the game has definitely changed. Like something I heard the other day, which was new to me, is you're no longer targeting with the audience; you're now targeting with the creative, and you're just letting the algorithm do the work for you after that. And so I'm excited to get back into the ad space. And so
Love it.
the MPL community will be growing and getting even bigger.
I'm nervo-sided because paid is just it's a blessing and it can be a curse also. And so, but Daniel, we're super rigorous over here. We never jump into anything without a good plan, and Daniel has a great plan. So
Nice one.
should be awesome.
I feel like marketing is the thing that I've really come to find. I know we're gonna talk about consulting and stuff, but it's like that's one of the things that I've come to find I've enjoyed a lot about starting my own thing. So yeah, it's cool that you're getting to experiment and try these things, and I'm looking forward to hearing the results.
And so, Matt, let's get to it, because there are a lot of things that we do want to talk about on entrepreneurship, your journey, and just kind of some really amazing lessons learned along the way. But, starting with your story, I call this the Brene Brown question, like, tell us everything, Matt. Like, how did you get here? Seeing dolphins in the morning and taking these great walks.
Yeah.
But yeah, seriously, you kind of have exploded on the scene. Hopefully, I mean, no offense, because I know you've been doing hard work for a long time, but like, I feel like 2025 was a breakout year. And like, if you a follower of the MPL and you have not heard of Matt, like, where have you been? Go check him out ASAP. And so like, how did this happen? Like, give us the full story.
If I asked you what your biggest risk to revenue is this year, would attrition even make the list? Let me share a quick story about a 1,000-person company whose primary goals were increasing revenue, improving customers' retention, and strengthening their sales funnel. On paper, everything looked great. But when they started to dig in and they connected their workforce data to business outcomes, they uncovered something they hadn't fully quantified: a 24% attrition rate. And 20% of that was within their most critical employees. That's not just an HR metric. That's revenue risk. That's a metric the CEO should track, the CFO, the CRO, everyone. And the real opportunity wasn't just cutting attrition, it was preventing the loss of the 20% of employees most critical to business results. Without the right system, they would have needed analysts running reports for weeks, reacting to exits after they happened. Instead, using Compete, they were able to identify the managers and compensation patterns driving regrettable attrition, quantify the business impact of losing top performers, shift from reactive reporting to proactive retention strategy, and bring board-ready, data-driven recommendations to leadership. Compete connects workforce data directly to business goals. If your 2026 plan includes revenue growth and stronger retention, which I'm sure everyone's does, it's definitely worth taking a look. Compete is legit. I highly recommend you book a conversation with them to see how they can help you turn workforce insight into business impact. Just go to compete.com/MPL. That's compete.com/MPL.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's one of those classic 10-year overnight success stories, right? I won't go too crazy in the background because I'm keen to dive into I guess, what I've done ever since leaving in-house. But long story short, HR professional through and through, always been very much a generalist. I'd say if I've started to specialize anywhere throughout my career, it was people operations. So very much like, the systems of work, the ways of work, which is where I would say, my exposure to the compensation, stream or focus or field has really, it had been a cornerstone of my career. And so I had the pleasure of doing that for a bunch of different businesses, a range of different industries, professional services, legal, manufacturing. But where I spent most of my time was in the sort of technology startup space. I loved it a lot. It's like the variety, the pace, the opportunity to build something from the ground up that, for the company for its first time and to really leave your fingerprints on something, that is a really compelling opportunity for me. And so I really enjoyed that part of my career. And then I guess like for me, I've always envisioned myself eventually doing my own thing. And for a long time in my career, I didn't know what that was going to be. I think everyone, or certainly me, you fall in love with the kind of founder story, this idea that you're going to come up with the idea for, a product or something like that. And I assumed that was going to be my path. I never came up with a product. So I had to work out what to do next. But yeah, there came a point in my career a couple of years ago where I felt ready. I felt like I had the experience. I felt like I had the opportunity to start to seriously take this sort of step. And when I thought about what it was that I wanted to do, really my train of thought was like, it is hard being a HR person right now. Like, it's a hard gig. We do a lot. It's such a broad role. And so I was like, if I could really sit down and think, what are the things that I love about my job, and like the things that I find the most interesting, and the things that I think like are important to a company, what are they? And like, you can look, there's so many different specializations you can go down as a HR professional. But I think one of the things that really was compelling to me was compensation. And it's kind of always been, like I mentioned, a cornerstone of my career. It's something that I'd always had, either ownership of or really good exposure to through the different companies that I'd worked in. And I think that stood me in pretty good stead compared to maybe the experience of what a lot of other HR professionals have, because where I guess in particular in my last role at Oyster, where I was leading the people ops team, we had the chance to build a compensation practice that helped them go from 250 to 650 in 12 months, employees across 70 countries. So really crazy like growth story. And, compensation alongside was one of the most interesting pieces of work that I've ever done. What that also gave me an incredible opportunity to do was speak that experience as well. And so that's where, I started to develop a little bit of a platform whilst working with Oyster, which was, incredible opportunity. And then that's when I started to get a lot of questions. Hey, how do we do compensation for, one or two countries, let alone 70? And so for me, as I was thinking like, okay, what are the things I'm interested in? Compensation was a clear like winner or certainly leading. But I also got the sense from this like constant kind of inbound inquiry, this was something that people who are in similar roles to mine need help with. And so literally, that was enough for me to go, okay, I think this is a path that I want to explore. And yeah, I kind of took the leap. So for the past couple of years, I've been running my business foundation. So I work with startups, so generally between the sort of 100 to 500 headcount size, and help them build their first compensation practices. So if they don't have a comp philosophy or a job level framework or some of these like formative things, I can be that person that can help them go through that journey and make like all of the things that hang off those pieces, those pillars, just that little bit easier. I mean, I think all of us have had experience with these sorts of companies, or at least growing companies. And when you don't know the answer to, what's a fair salary, or what, how do we define this role, or what level should it be? Those are all incredibly difficult things that consume a lot of time and become real nuisances for companies. And so I help them not have to deal with some of those challenges. And that's kind of where I find myself today. So I spend most of my time doing that. A couple of other like areas I focus on, or where I'll say other pursuits I have, is a one-day virtual event here that I run in Australia called Startup People Summit, which is very much geared to that same persona, head of people at a startup or a scale up, and just tries to bring together the people in the community that have done cool stuff across the people spectrum, and, create a little bit of a playbook. How do we navigate the very evolving role that we, all live and work in, and what's going on in, the environment and things like that. So yeah, that and a newsletter and podcast, and I'll stop there. But that's
no, that's great. Yeah, I mean, you do a lot of great stuff. And so, like, if you take us back to the moment where, you decide you're going to start a practice that focuses on compensation, you come up with this cool name, Foundation, with, the logo and everything. What were some of the first steps that you took? Because I feel like that's where people get stuck. They're like, all right, I know I want to do this thing, but I don't even know where to start. Yeah. Where did you start? Because I imagine you didn't have like your ICP figured out or any of that stuff back then.
Yeah, it's a really great point. Let me drill down into that piece. I think let me start by talking about the criteria under which I departed from being in-house to then take the lead, because I think my journey is unique, and I don't necessarily I don't think it's the right one for everybody. But for me, Oyster, like every other tech company, was going through a lot of challenges through the downturn in 2023. And so there was kind of an opportunity to stay with the business and maybe have less of the things that really excite me, less of the variety, less of the opportunities to build new things. And, or, it's more of a how can we streamline, how can we make this more efficient, those sorts of things. And so I think I sat there and went, okay, is this a role I want to stay in, or is this now the catalyst for me to take the leap and start to dive into things? And that's when I went through that rationalization process. What are the things that I like? What are the things that I think would be important for, the kind of person that I want to work with? Those sorts of questions. And then I guess what I spent the first couple of months doing once I did leave, I left in October. So you're coming up to the end of the year. I'm probably not going to be in a great position with a cold start, effectively. Like, I didn't ease into this. I left my job and then I started being a consultant. I was probably not going to be in a great position to try and sell a service or something like that on day one of being a consultant. And so what I did is I used that time between October and the end of the year to just speak to as many people as I could and just validate where my head had been around the service that I'm delivering. Do startups actually need help with this? Is compensation really a challenge? And that, I think, gave me the confidence to go from being, hey, I'm going to be someone who does compensation, because that's literally as broad as I was to start with. I was just like, I just want to focus on compensation. And I think if I dug up a first version of my website, it was like a Chinese takeaway menu of every different flavor of, it was 10,000 things on there. And a lot of the early feedback I got was like, even though compensation's a niche, it's like overwhelming. Like, I look at that and I just go like, I don't know what of these things are right for me. So I did a lot of that kind of customer research and speaking to people. I also did a lot of reading and a lot of learning around product marketing, and around like the value of the niche and around how, and I still remember this feedback. I'll have to remember who told it to me, but basically like, you need to define your customer to the narrowest point, so narrow, that you think that actually there's like one person or two people in your community that are actually going to be who you would sell to. And only then have you probably reached a point where you can actually like truly say who your ICP is and truly know what it is that you're selling and to who, and that it really resonates with that core person. And I think that was really compelling for me, because what I, conversely coming into this, what I see a lot of other people do is go, I'm going to be a HR consultant and I'm going to do everything in the HR bucket, which we already know is huge, and I'm going to do it for everyone. And I think some of those people might, or some of the ones that I see, have trouble like getting traction with that value proposition, because it's kind of like, I guess, what do you do that is unique, and how is it really compelling to that person and the problems that they're facing? So that was kind of the process that I went through. And then, that sort of helped me frame up, okay, well, I love startups. A lot of people in startups are telling me that these are the problems that they're facing. And I went from being, I'm just going to be a compensation consultant, down to, I'm going to be a compensation consultant that focuses on companies that are at, and I think I said 50 to 500 to start with, employees. And the logic there was that at about 50, they're starting to have some pain points around pay. But before they, start to get too big, they probably haven't got a dedicated compensation headcount. So they need someone with this specialist support. And I'm going to focus on 3 explicit things: the comp philosophy, the job level framework, and the salary bands. That's it. And if you go on my website today, that's all I talk about. Now, in reality, that doesn't exclude me from doing other work. But now when people look at me, they go, that's the thing that Matt can do, and he can do great at, because it's this very narrow thing. So he must be great at it, because it's like 3 things. And so there's a marketing psychology magic to it, but it's kind of worked out. But that's kind of how I went from HR to, to comp to even more niche.
Well, you've already said some things that like you're speaking our language, one of which is how you went from, hey, y'all, look at me. I can do everything compensation. I can do this and I can do that and this and that and this. And that is like a very, and I was like nodding my head listening to you, because I've done the same thing. I think any entrepreneur, particularly on the services side, has been through the challenge of like, how do you like pinpoint? You can do a lot of things because you've had a very successful career. How do you pinpoint the things that the market wants from you? The market feels like you do the best. And sometimes there's hard truths there. Like, I thought it would be these other things that I would be focusing on, but turns out it's very specific. And so that just really resonated with me, because we have embraced a kind of a feedback research based approach. Like when Daniel and I first monetized, I think we went to HR Tech, and, HR Tech Vegas, the largest HR software conference in the world. And Daniel was like, all right, I'm taking this side, which, by the way, he took the easy side, the mid-market side. And I took the other side, which is like the startups that like didn't even really have clear UVPs. And,
we had no budget.
Dude, it was brutal. And so, but we literally were like, okay, this is our talk track. This is what we're going to ask them. We're not going to pitch them a single thing. And then at lunchtime, we're going to compare notes, and we revise. Like Daniel's like editing a shared note on his
Tell
iPhone.
me you switch sides as well, right? No.
No, fuck no. Are you kidding me?
Come
Daniel
on,
at
man.
lunch was like, oh, I think I got all these great leads at these great
Meanwhile, you've just been denied 1,000 times.
Oh, God. Yeah. Between that and like hearing just like really bad pitches, no offense, my comrades out there. I know you were doing your best, but getting back to the point, like, you know, research is a core part of what we do. The other thing you mentioned is product marketing. And the reason why like that really resonated with me is the first way you popped up on my radar. I think Jesse mentioned you. Like we have a lot of shared contacts, and we're privy to we have access to a really amazing people in the field. And, you know, so when we see there's someone new that we have like these shared relationships, it's like friends, right? It's like, hey, you're our people.
Absolutely.
And apart from that, I remember I looked you up and I was like, sick branding, like sick name, foundation, sick branding. And so like the marketing is, you know, we're marketers, like that's what we do for a living. And so tell us more about this research that you did and how I know, but I really don't know that you were intentional about how you marketed yourself and, you know, from your visual identity to all those things, the things that a lot of entrepreneurs take for granted because it's really hard to stand out to HR. Like HR is just notoriously difficult to sell to. That's partly why we exist. And, you know, standing out in a crowded conversation is even harder. And you have done both incredibly well. So tell us, like, give us a peek behind your playbook.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple of things here. One is that, again, like looking at the journey others have taken, I came into this thing knowing that I didn't want to be Matt McFarlane consulting. Like I didn't want to be that sort of, I think when I look at people like that and you know, I had done this briefly myself as well. I think often it looks like a bit of a placeholder between jobs. And so it doesn't look like a serious thing, right? Like when you kind of see that. And so no offense to people that have done that, like that's, if it works for you, great. But for me, I was like very consciously, I want to have an identity and I want people to see that I'm serious about this. The other second thing that has been an incredible game changer for me is that my partner has her own branding agency. We have been together for I think 13, 14 years now. And like branding has been drilled into me. Like, you know, when I get to hear about her clients and exactly right. But that being
real
said,
MVP.
Absolutely, truly. But the lesson for others here is like, don't discount the impact of a brand. And so I very consciously going into this knew from day one. And look, you know, did she take me on as a client and did I pay her up front? No. But as soon as I got my first paycheck, like as soon as I got my first invoice, boom, it went straight to her. And I paid full price, by the way. I don't want anyone to be under any illusions that there was a discount. Yeah, I was super conscious about it. And so this kind of research process that I went through at the start of, you know, before truly diving into it, that really helped me hone, you know, who it was that I was speaking to. I mean, I had also been this person, so I kind of knew, you know, what's important to them and how to stand out to them, things like that. And this is probably a good segue into like the broader marketing piece. But yeah, we sat down, we went through a whole like, you know, who is our persona? What do they look like? How do they sound? What's important to them? All these sorts of things, like a full brief and brand process. And then we looked at, okay, well, you know, who are my competitors? Who am I competing with in this space? And, you know, there's the big sort of, you know, Aon, Radford. I'm never really truly competing for them, but they're a well-known brand. And so if a company is thinking about getting help, they may think of them. And if you stack up all of those logos, all of these like conglomerates and things like that, they're very plain, very like, you know, Times New Roman, serif font, like all that sort of stuff. And when I saw my brand next to them and the color and the, you know, the curves and the logo, all that sort of stuff, I was like, cool, that's exactly what I want. Like I want to be fun. I want to be a bit more poppy. Like let's be a little less serious, because I think HR sometimes like we feel like we have to be super serious, but I don't think as people, I don't think we're all like that. Yeah. And so that's how I got from there to a brand really. But so a little bit of a, you know, secret weapon, but I knew from day one that, you know, if I was going to do this and I was going to do it seriously, that I was going to have a brand and I was going to invest in that up front for sure.
And I think maybe you were about to get into this stuff, but I'm curious how you landed your first client. Like what was like the sales and marketing playbook? Like it feels like you were pretty intentional about clearly defining the ICP, thinking
Yeah.
about the personas, thinking about what the brand should look and feel like and sound like. Once you had all of that nailed down, did you have an inkling around what was going to be the main sales channel? I imagine a lot of it was
Yeah.
like just reaching out to people you know, but I think that would be really helpful for the people
Mm.
listening. And by the way, if you've made it this far in the episode, you've now realized that you're going to get like a master class from Matt on how to go off on your own and start your own thing if you want to do that. And so, yeah, walk us through the marketing and sales side of it.
Yeah. So again, having been this person and having been in-house and woken up every day to, 2, 3, 4, 10 emails from, cold outbound emails from people, I knew that that was not going to be an approach that was going to work for me. I mean, we all day, every day, we are archiving emails from salespeople that are looking to sell HR tech or something like that. And so again, having had that experience myself and having known the criteria that I had purchased tech or services or something under, I knew that my strategy had to be one of building trust with my audience and not coming at it from this like, hey, I used to be you and now I'm selling to you and, just trying to pretend I know what's going on or something like that. So I really early on, plus just me and my nature, cold sales was not going to be something that I was super excited about. And so I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to attract people to me, how am I going to do that? So the two kind of channels that I focused on very heavily in my first year, one was obviously LinkedIn. That's where all of us are. It's where, I certainly learn a lot from people in the profession from LinkedIn, where I've built some incredible relationships, all those sorts of things. And the other was networking. So if you can sort of know, like, and trust people, and that phrase gets trotted around a lot, but it's like ultimately true, right? Like if you know someone, you know of them and got a relationship with them, or there's a warm connection or a referral or something like that, that works infinitely better than, again, me reaching out and just being like, hey, do you like compensation? Do you need help? Like all that sort of stuff. And so my strategies with both were kind of like, I'll start with LinkedIn first. I mean, I came into LinkedIn and I did what probably most people do, which is that, like, firstly, they're probably a little bit too scared to post because it's intimidating and you're worried that you might say the wrong thing or that someone would criticize it or something like that. Plus, we also think a lot about, like, can I have an opinion when I'm sort of this representative or an ambassador of a company in some respects? So I think sometimes that shows up as well. I had all of the same insecurities, but I also had no strategy around how I went to market with LinkedIn. So literally the first thing I did, and I think this is a theme that I would like really drill into people, is like, you've got to invest in yourself. And so I did a LinkedIn course. I looked up the biggest name I knew in LinkedIn, and it was Justin Welsh at the time. I think it probably still is. And he had a course and it was $150 and it was, a few hours, and he will teach you how to do LinkedIn and build a system. And I was like, you know what, for $150, it's worth just having a crack and seeing what happens. And it was great. It gave me everything I needed to go, okay, if I'm going to be serious about LinkedIn, how am I going to do it? How do I come up with ideas for posts? How do I, create a bit of a system so that it's not something that just consumes my every waking hour? It still kind of does, to be fair, but LinkedIn is one of those things, right? But it gave me a lot of structure and a lot of way. And I think one of the key things I took from that is, like, to build trust, you have to kind of give something. And for me, it was like, how can I make sure that the content that I'm creating gives value? Like, almost like, had someone paid me for it, what would I talk about that would be valuable to that audience? And so that's where I started. I was just like, what are the things that I'm working on? So again, of those three things, comp philosophies, job levels, salaries, like, let's just talk about random things that come up for a startup throughout that experience and share my knowledge, my stories, my experience, all those sorts of things. Yeah, that's like really where I focused. And I think, like, a tip for people who are looking for content to get started, you're generally like going to be selling or working with, selling to people that are kind of downstream of you in terms of your experience. At the end of the day, I don't sell to compensation professionals who know how to do what I do, because they would do it for themselves. I sell to people who are too busy with 10,000 other things to be able to tackle compensation, or maybe they don't have the expertise. And so a really simple trick you can come up with to help generate content is, what was a problem I was dealing with 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Like, what are these things that you can actually speak with with a credibility perspective and use that to help impart value on your community? And that was literally my playbook for last year. It was just put content out there, not last year, the year before, but like, just put content out that speaks to all of these challenges and how to overcome them. And eventually that really starts to resonate with people. You start to obviously get followers because people are like, hey, you're talking about a problem that I face on an ongoing basis. So I'm going to start to get these tips. And yeah, before you know it, you'll start to get people that reach out. Hey, I'd love to talk to you about this. Okay, cool. Now you're starting to get inbound. You can start to have these conversations. Eventually it starts to turn into opportunities and kind of go from there. So that was how I got I kind of got two clients at the same time when I started. I was incredibly fortunate. That was how I got one of them. But Stephen, you were going to jump in.
I just was going to really just continue the conversation. And so now you have a brand, you have a focused kind of marketing effort. You're like, all right, it's going to be LinkedIn and then networking, leveraging superpower. I'm guessing you already had a material network and you're just kind of working it to its fullest extent. And I love that because I'm an old head back in the day before LinkedIn and all of this, like that was the only option. And I just feel like it's a free option. You know, I guess there is the cost of your time, and it's often overlooked. And so, but you have your focused marketing plan, you invest in yourself, you start generating kind of traction with your posts, you know, that is generating kind of intrigue and interest in learning more about Matt. And then it happens, you close your first deal. And so one of the things that I literally have struggled with at every single company that I've been a part of is pricing. Like, how do you price? And I think you mentioned to us in preparation for this conversation that you had some big lessons learned in terms of pricing. And so how did you even put something out there? Like, what was take us to like the before, the lesson learned, and the after? And because I think that like understanding that full picture is like gold for anyone listening to this.
Yeah. Okay. I think the thing that I hear from a lot of people that I speak to who are consulting as well is that they kind of they try to pluck a number. They try to go, what's like the most I think I can get away with? What's like maybe what others are charging? They kind of don't really, they almost try to take a bit of a benchmark approach to it, like, which, you know, to be fair, is kind of my background. But where I started, and I don't really know what my logic here was. Like, I don't know if this came to me as a previous lesson or something like that, but, you know, in essence, what did I do? I sat down and I went, okay, what do I want to earn as a salary? I knew that my last salary was, I think, you know, in Australian dollars, it was like 230,000, something like that. And I was like, well, for me, a big symbol or a signal of my growth and progression, part of it can be from a monetary perspective as well. So if I were to say, okay, well, what would I like as a salary? I just said, let's just do $250,000. That's going to be the salary that I would like to take home as an entrepreneur. But then what are all the other costs that are associated with that? Here in Australia, we have superannuation, which is our pension, 12%. Add that on. There's all of the costs of running my business. There's, you know, I use software for project management. I have all of these other things that I need. I have, you know, I've got an accountant now, like all of these costs of doing business. Add those on. Then, and this is something that, again, I hear a lot of consultants skip over, is like, you are a business. You need to make a profit. Yes, you're getting a salary, but at the end of the day, you also eventually want to be able to make investments into things, you know, that help you grow and enable you further as a business. And so you've got to add a profit margin. That is your like, here's what I've got to clear in a year for me. That's how I kind of came up with my first number. But then I had to distill that down into an hourly rate. What, you know, when I'm going to clients and charging them, what's that actual figure? And to do that, I said, okay, well, if I work 5 days a week, you know, 40-hour weeks, what does that look like as a number? And I got whatever that was. Okay, well, you know, I'm going to take 4 weeks of holiday, maybe a year. I might be out sick 2 weeks a year, so I'm not going to be working. So I need to deduct those hours from the equation. And then how many hours am I left with? And then again, this is something that I think people gloss over, is that you're not going to be billing all of those hours. Like, you sell time. That's what you do as a consultant. You're not going to be billing all of those hours because, of course, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time doing proposals. I spend a lot of time networking. These are all things in service of the business. And so you have to kind of come up with a figure for how much of your time you think you're going to spend doing that. And for me, I actually leaned on, I mentioned I'd work in professional services, and there was a magical number that they always mentioned around utilization, which was 70%. They said all of our consultants have to be billing at least 70% of their time. The rest of it goes to leave or HR or whatever activities. And so I use that number as well. And I was like, okay, if I take the remaining hours in the year and I take 30% off and throw them away, how many hours am I actually going to be billing a client for in a year? And it was, I don't remember what it is. And then you've got to deduct that number that you came up before with the number of hours that are left in the year. And you've got your rate. Like that was literally the process that I took. And then I'll be very upfront, to see that number to start with. I was like, no freaking way is someone going to pay me that. I think it was like $300 and something an hour. I was like, no way. This is like what doctors charge, it's like lawyers charge, those sorts of things. And I was incredibly uncomfortable with it. I was like, I must have done something wrong here. I've got to recheck my equations, all these sorts of things. And eventually I had to put that number out there, and I was like, I'm going to get knocked back 100%. I was like, should I, I was discounting in my head. I was negotiating myself down before I'd even put something in front of the client. And, again, blessing is that my partner had been her own agency for a while. So I'd seen a lot of the challenges that she'd gone through. And eventually I was just like, I'm just going to put the number out there and see what happens. And I got the job. I got my first job. And that for me was like, okay, I've got to stop questioning, my worth or not let my head try to talk me out of doing something that on paper and in every other way looks like the right thing to do. Because it's, at the end of the day, that was the value that I needed to place on myself to have a successful business. And that was the value that the company was prepared to pay at the time. And now we could probably do a whole other episode about like this concept of value-based pricing and things like that and kind of how to go up from there. But yeah, that for me was how I landed on my first rate. And I think in particular helped myself overcome just that severe imposter syndrome. Fundamentally, I was just like, no damn way is someone going to pay that. But you know what? They did, and they have, and they continue to. And in fact, I've now got clients that pay more than that. So yeah, I think you've just got to back yourself in these sorts of things and just trust that it will work in some respects.
That's so relatable. I feel like every first-time business owner goes through a similar process. The way that we got to pricing at the very beginning was different. It was more of like research what's out there in the market, what are they charging, and then we'll come up with a price. But I remember early on being more willing to negotiate down or to sometimes do things for free. And Steven being like, dude, no, like we gotta charge. Like we can't just
yeah.
He's like, we gotta make money as a business.
Yeah.
And it was so uncomfortable the first couple of times. I mean, I'm sure you get this too, Matt, where you have somebody that comes to you and they're like, I have an idea. And every time now that I hear that, I'm like, uh-oh. Like this is about to be a pitch for why I should do something for free for them. And I would be more inclined, because I think by nature I'm a people pleaser, to be like, oh yeah, like, we'll think about it. And Steven being like,
problem.
No, you can't do that.
I literally printed off a banner saying don't do shit for free at one point for my partner and myself, because we both grapple with it. But yeah, I printed off this thing and I was like, don't do shit for free. You can't do it. You're not going to be successful.
Daniel, I was just going to add that even when you, and I agree, Matt, we could have a whole nother podcast on, value-based pricing, or just what do you do when what was working no longer works, because that also happens, because that happened to us. And so it's a complicated thing. And I think, to Daniel's point, I really relate to the journey that you went on. And the only difference that I had from Daniel, because I'm also a people pleaser, is that I had investors and a board that would literally just tear me apart when I would do things that were not taking us in a commercially beneficial way. And so yeah. And so, just to keep things going, there were highs, there were lows, in your first year. There was, probably some really lonely times, and probably times that you shared joy with, other partner, your actual partner, and just other partners that you were working with. And so if you look back, what were some of the challenges, and what were some of the wins that you didn't expect to achieve?
Yeah. One of the challenges, I would say, one of the biggest challenges I think I grappled with at the start was going from being someone who led a team and had, worked with a team, worked with colleagues, worked with peers, to doing my own thing. In many ways, it's what I wanted. I had been a leader for a while and I enjoyed it. But if I'm honest, when when I saw some of the cool shit my team was doing, I was a little jealous, and I was like, I wish I was more hands-on. And I actually missed being, a bit more technical. I mean, I see the pace of technology and how it's changing, and I was like, I want to be in that. I want to be in amongst it. And so I got that. I obviously got that in spades, which has been amazing. But then conversely, I lost the chance to share in that journey with team members, and to hear how their days were, and just have relationships with them that were professional and personal. So I think you're right. The isolation piece is incredibly difficult to get used to. And I think we discount a lot how much the culture of a workplace helps us be successful and get stuff done as well. And so I think you have to try and replicate that for yourself through whatever system. That was definitely the biggest challenge. And I've had to supplement that through, fortunately, through networking, which then doubles as a benefit of being something that, helps me be successful from a sales perspective, I guess. But yeah, I'm really conscious now. So I mentioned at the start of this that I live in a small town. It's a regional town. I now make a point of going an hour and a half north to the city once a month, and I spend a couple of days there, and I co-work with people, and I catch up with friends for dinner, and I do that very deliberately because I have to have that time, because I am an extrovert as well. I love, I get a lot of energy for that sort of stuff, but I also appreciate that I can't be in an office 24/7 because I never get anything done. But then, okay, and then conversely, so that's the challenge, the joy. I mean, I still remember, it's still one of the fondest memories I have was the first invoice I sent for $2,500. It was nothing, but it was the most impactful amount of money I've ever earned in my life. That they'd said yes to it, that I delivered it, that they were happy with it, that they paid it, and that the money showed up in the account. And I was just like, this feels so different to, getting your weekly, monthly paycheck. And, it's something that you can truly stand behind and say, I've accomplished this, by myself, and I've done these things. That for me is still one of the standout experiences that I've had so far in this journey. And then it just continues to be the growth, I guess. I've had the incredible, I've done the hard work, but I've also had the incredible fortune of building something that is growing and is successful. And I think another thing I'm very conscious of is my partner and I literally call it the board meeting. And every month we sit down at the boardroom table, which is our dining room table, and we look at how things have gone. We look at, what are the goals for the year? What are the measures that we had in place around, signals of progress, things like that. And we sit down and we go, how are we going? Are we tracking? Are we, were there things that popped up we were surprised by? But it just gives me this opportunity to kind of pull my head out of, the day to day and the operations of what I'm doing, and actually really appreciate the momentum and the stage of the business and how things are going. And the fact that I've somehow managed to build this life where I live by the beach, doing a job that I love. And
see dolphins in the morning.
I see dolphins in the morning, it's when you have that opportunity to kind of really sit back and go, this is pretty cool. There's people who would love to have this, and I'm so thankful for that. So yeah, I think that for me, taking that time to be grateful about it is so important.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost. The goalpost is always moving. So, what was the goal a year ago isn't the same goal today. So it's hard to appreciate the wins. And so I relate with that. I also related to your experience of being a one-person team after only having worked in corporate for the, beginning of your career. And I remember so if I go back to November 2022, I get laid off by Humu, and things change at Humu. People go to different companies. I decide to go all in on MPL. Steven's still doing Workify, and it's like a one-man experiment. I'm figuring out a lot of the same things that you've walked us through today. How do we price this? How do we sell this? What's our strategy? And year one, it's good. I feel like year one's always, you're riding the highs more than the lows, because anything is a win. Year two comes around, and all of a sudden, marketing teams are making changes. People are being let go. Budgets are shrinking, and MPL sort of had to reinvent itself. And about midway through this, I don't think I had realized that this was happening yet, but the very beginning of that phase, I go to Unleash by myself, and it was my first solo conference, and I run into my former boss, And, she's, a VP of marketing at another HR tech company at this point. And she's telling me about where everybody else went, like so-and-so's at this company, so-and-so's at this company. And then she's like, so how are you doing? And in my head, I'm like doing well, but like things could be better. And some of that FOMO started to set in. And so I totally relate to that. And eventually we had to sort of like reinvent MPL. It's why Stephen had us experiment with events and some of the things that we're doing now. It sounds like you maybe didn't have like a slowdown in the business growth, but you've also had to reinvent the business, and you now have like this portfolio approach to your career. And I know that you wrote another post about this recently. Share a little bit more about that. Like, why did you decide that you wanted to have this portfolio career, and how are you thinking about building out this next era of foundation? One of my favorite webinars from 2025 was about leave. And this was like a month or two post baby being born. So it was really relevant to me at the time. And we talked about how leave is usually put into 3 buckets. Number 1, the compliance and pay side that you have to get right. Number 2, the business continuity side. So coverage, managers, the return to work plan. And 3, the very real human stuff that's happening at home that shapes how people show up. This couldn't have hit harder for me and Steven. We've both recently added little ones to the family, and it served as a reminder of how complex leave can be, even on a tiny team like ours. Most companies focus almost entirely on that first bucket, but Tilt is built for all 3. Tilt is a leave experience platform that manages all types of leave, from FMLA and PFL to everything in between, with role-based visibility for HR, managers, and employees. They create personalized leave plans so that people know what's happening, what's next, and how they're supported throughout the entire journey. Behind the scenes, Tilt's AI-powered technology automates the admin, keeping everybody aligned, ensuring accurate pay, and turning compliance into a clear, trusted process, so HR teams can focus on the human moments that actually define culture. If you want leave to feel less like spreadsheets and more like clarity and care, check out Tilt at hellotilt.com/MPL. That's hellotilt.com/MPL.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I would start by saying, like, I'm only 2 years into this, right? So, like, I'm still early days. Hopefully I never have a slowdown, but yeah, certainly I'm working to never have a slowdown, but it's still early stages, I feel like, in terms of like, yeah, where things are going. But in terms of the portfolio career, so I guess there's a few like realizations I had in my first year that really drove like where the strategy is focused now. And so the first one is that as a consultant who sells time for money, I'm limited by the hours in the day that I can or am prepared to work, or the maximum amount that a client's prepared to pay me for those hours. And so it starts to really limit your scalability if you do want to grow, or if you do want to find ways to like amplify your revenue, things like that. And because I had spent and was spending a lot of time on my marketing efforts, I mean, I was deliberate about LinkedIn. I pretty much chanced into starting a podcast and a newsletter. Like I did it. So really quick sidebar. So the newsletter was what I was going to do. And I was like, I'm going to interview people and I'm just going to write it up like Lenny's newsletter, like the really successful product newsletter. I'm just going to write it up. And then I was like, actually, if I'm going to be interviewing people, I may as well like record it, and then I may as well put it online. And then suddenly I've got a podcast. That was literally it. And so I was spending all this time doing it, and it's costing me money. I was paying money for the email platform. It obviously cost me time. I had to buy a microphone, all these sorts of things, right? And so I was like, okay, this is actually starting to cost me a bit of time, which I can't bill. I can't sell to a client. How do I start to make sure this thing becomes a little bit more cost neutral? And so I was like, well, I feel like I get a lot of really great feedback about my brand. I'm sure it's something that other brands would love to leverage, is the relationship that I have with my audience. How can I think about monetizing that? How can I think about, whether it's ads or whatever it might be? And that was really the catalyst for that, is that I need to offset the cost of this. And then like I've been a little bit surprised about the uptake and the interest from some of the brands, to a point now where I'm like, okay, this is actually clearly something that can be a revenue stream. It's something that can be a business. And you know, if the alternative is to start an agency and hire people and kind of scale that way, then this feels like a good alternative, because whilst I'm not necessarily averse to kind of growing and becoming an agency, I think I'm not yet at a point where I want to like dip my toe back into the water of more being that manager and kind of going down that path. I also take being responsible for someone's livelihood and, you know, their mortgage and their, all these sorts of things very seriously. So I think if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be very intentional, more intentional than the podcast. And so that was one of the things. And then the other really, you know, happened almost as not flippantly, but I'd kind of been thinking for a really long time, and it's been a lot of time speaking to people in my network, so predominantly in Australia, about like, where do we go? Where do like heads of people that are working at startups, where do they go when they need to speak to other people, or they want to learn about the challenges that people are facing and, you know, how we're overcoming it, all these sorts of things. In Australia, we have a growing startup community of, you know, businesses, things like that, but we've otherwise got fairly established like industry, telecom, banking, those sorts of things, right? And so there wasn't really a space for people to talk about the things they were dealing with from a startup perspective, not in Australia, not in the APAC region. And so I was like, well, okay, why not see if there's interest in trying to create something like that? And it was literally just that idea that then became Startup People Summit. It was, how do we create a platform that gives others that are helping, you know, build people functions in startups to talk about what they're doing and create almost like a bit of a playbook. Like, what are the really practical things that you're doing that are helping you do what you do for the startup that you work in? And that was it. I started going out to people and just asking them if they wanted to speak. And I of course got a brand naturally. I started to talk about it, and we started to think of like the event platform that we would hold it on. And it was super scrappy. And again, like massive credit to my partner. She is a very like operational logistics kind of mind behind it. So she did a lot of the build in terms of how it happened. But yeah, that was literally the kind of the limit of the vision. And then we pulled together. It was, you know, it was one day, it was like 40 something speakers. It was, I think we got 800 or 900 people to show up. It was good. And look, it didn't make money first year. It was not positive from a cash flow perspective, which is okay, because I kind of did it as like let's just see what happens. Let's just, you know, I'm in a position very fortunately to be able to afford a bet like that, and let's see what happens. And you know, for all intents and purposes, it was a success, not a financial one, but in every other way. And so I'm absolutely going to do it again this year and kind of, see how we can continue to turn it into something that's another pillar of I guess the stable or the portfolio that I'm working on now.
Well, again, another point in the conversation to give kudos to your MVP, to your partner. Absolutely. Because I remember I signed up and I showed up for some. But I remember being an events person and having started an events business, literally nothing. You can be scrappy and you can do things, but it also takes time. And I remember thinking the size and scale, along with like the level of quality in like the details of your landing page, the registration process, the comms, and I'm guessing your partner's fingerprints are probably, you know, touched a lot of that. And I remember thinking like, wow, Matt must not sleep at all. But now we know there's a secret weapon involved. And so, absolutely, you know, another thing, you know, for those listening and those interested in events, like, here's the bottom line. I am a huge proponent for more events in our community. I am willing to help anyone that, you know, wants to launch an event, because, you know, 5 years into this modern people leader experience, you know, one of the things that we constantly hear or consistently hear is there aren't enough quality events. And I just think to myself, how is that even possible? There are so many events, so many communities, but yet here our community, people feel like there just isn't enough, you know, quality events that you would want to dedicate your time, you know, to attend or even pay. And so, but we were, you know, huge feedback that we received up front was, if you're going to do events, do not expect to make money from events in your first year. Fortunately, that wasn't the case for us. Usually we've had all the lessons learned, but you know, there is a bit of luck in all this as well, to caveat all the great things that you shared and that we've shared. But when you think about, I want to end with brand. And, you know, when you think about your brand and how you've been able to stand out. If you could boil it down to kind of 3 important moves that, you know, the aspiring consultant or fractional or, you know, thought leader, you know, out there listening should focus their energy on, like, what would that be? And this is off script, so yeah, take time.
Yeah. Deep breath. What would be the lessons? I mean, I think the first one is that you have to be intentional. You have to be really clear about who it is you're speaking to, what's important to them. You have to be clear about how you want to show up, all those sorts of things. You know, I think the visual identity part of that is so incredibly important. And again, it's you know, arguably been one of the best investments that I've made. And I'm not just saying that because, you know, someone's in the next room who benefits from it. So I think you have to be intentional. What else? Another couple of things. It's a lot about consistency as well. I think you've got to, again, with I guess clarity and being clear about who it is and who you serve and the value proposition and like how you can help and things like that. I think then comes consistency and how that shows up and how you can be present to your audience. I think about that a lot in terms of like how I write. It's easy for me because I am my brand. So how I write is my brand. And then, obviously from a visual perspective, what would be a third one? I don't know. We might have to do a follow-up. Might have to drop something. I'll have to give it some thought. Yeah.
I feel like on the visual side of things, I remember for me, I found brands that I admired in other spaces and tried to build something tried to create something that reflected that in our space. And so, like, I remember being a big fan of people like Dave Gerhardt with Exit 5 and just loving the brand the brand that he had built for himself, but also the brand he had built for his community. And then there were like a few other names. Like I think of
later it was Emily Kramer. That was another one. When we found her, we were like, oh my God, we need to change some things here.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. Is just what are the things? I mean, like again, I was really intentional when I built a brand that I didn't want to like blend in with kind of what existed in the marketplace. So I guess that gave me, what I wasn't looking for, and you've talked about like what are the elements that you were looking for. But then I guess I was also like, I do want to break the mold. I do want to be like, fun, a bit more interesting, a bit more bright, colorful, all these sorts of things. So I think, you have to understand what it is you want to bring to it to help it refine it. But, the other lesson is that again, like when I was like the comp professional that did everything, I kind of was just slapping together pitch decks and things like that based on no logic whatsoever, right? I never could have done this without support. And I think I never could have done many things without support. But I think if there's one lesson that I've learned, and I think this is something that I often find can be a real like common thing with HR people, is one, they think they've got to do it all themselves because they're used to it internally. And two is that they're often super frugal. And I think if there's two things that I've learned a lot through this experience is like lean into what you're great at, just get someone else to do the stuff that you're either not great at or you don't have time to do, or might take you away from actually doing the work. And I think for me, brand and design, that is absolutely something that I've had to outsource and has been obviously a strong part of my success. But it's been a thread that has woven through a lot of what I've done, has been just like, I'm not good at this. I don't know how to do it. Do I want to spend the time learning how to do it? Not really. Is there someone who could do it for me for a bit of money? Yes. Okay. Like just do that.
That's such good advice. And so before we go into rapid fire questions, if people want to find you, if they want to learn more about Foundation or your summit or all of the work that you're doing, is there one central place that they should go to?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is definitely the central hub of that. So find me on there. I think I'm now up to 4 brands. So I am starting to write more regularly about my business and how I built it, and try to be as transparent as possible about like, how do I make the money I make? How's pricing work? I literally just did an article about pricing. So all those sorts of things are now coming out as well. But LinkedIn is the best place to find all of those things.
Matt's a great follow. All right, so rapid fire questions. This is the last part of every episode, and we've got 3 questions for you. So question 1, what's one piece of advice that you'd give to somebody starting in HR today?
I mean, this feels tired, but you have to be like all over AI. Just like understand it, play with it, find things that you can build with it. Like we could have a whole other podcast about this as well. Like I think if you're coming into the profession, you've probably never faced a greater challenge. But I think if you can bring AI literacy, that's something that is very much missing from most teams that I speak to today.
We actually don't get that response to this question, and it's always surprised me. It's like, learn the business, or there are other really important things that you absolutely should do, but AI, it just is central to everything at this point. So
it so is. I actually saw it put really well the other day, which is that because it's such a new technology, your 5 years in your career, or your 3 or 2, to be fair, you've had the same level of experience with AI as what anyone else in the workforce has. And so you have to capitalize on that. You have to go from being someone who is, and I'm generalizing, if you're younger, you're generally more curious, you're generally more open to change, you're generally more adaptable. Use that as your differentiator, because there are plenty of people, I can tell you, that are just like, it's a phase, like it's going to pass us by, and it really isn't.
Or just don't have time because they're managing teams and they have kids and they're, all the things, growing a consulting brand, rapidly growing a consulting brand. So next question, if you could steal one strategy from another company, what would it be? And it could, this isn't people related, it's like any strategy.
Yeah, good question. I don't know if there's one company. I'm sure there's a company out there, but like for me, one of the things that I constantly need to improve at is like how I manage my workload. And so I think I would say I'm like doing pretty well, but I still often find that, when you're working across a few different brands and they each have their own different initiatives, I can find that like supremely overwhelming. And if I didn't use like a software and other things to help me, I would be a lost cause. But I'm sure there's a company out there that is doing very well at that. And I need to get one of their people to help me out.
I feel like I'm trying to avoid going down another rabbit hole, but I feel like we could have an episode on that as well. Last question for you. Who do we need to have on the show next?
Ooh, good question. So I'll go with the first person that came to mind. There's a company here called Zip. They are like, they started as a buy now, pay later, very similar to Afterpay. And I had the chance to catch up with someone who I've been LinkedIn buddies with for ages last week in Melbourne at an event. And his name's Neelan. And he literally on his phone took me through some of the stuff that he's doing in the People Ops team with AI. And it is just like, if I talk about how the status quo or the benchmark right now in HR teams is like, we use ChatGPT and we prompt it in the in the chat screen and we're using it that way. Neelan's like light years ahead of anyone else I've ever spoken to. Like the level of systems and sophistication that he's built on a shoestring, I might add, like super scrappy, but high quality, high caliber, high fidelity, like just incredible stuff. So he'll be my nomination. I'll have to make an intro.
Love that. Daniel knows I love to nerd. Like I'm all over everything AI right now. So we will definitely reach out to him. And that gets us to our final tradition before we wrap things up. It's what we call one word or phrase close. We all respond with a word or a few words that as we reflect on the last hour or so, just a way to wrap things up. And again, we prefer for our guests to go first.
Yeah, let's do it. I'll go with grateful. I think like grateful to, have you guys as part of my network, as part of my community, grateful to have this conversation. Yeah, I love reflecting on this sort of stuff. I think it's nice just for me to take the chance and see how things have gone. But if it can help others, I'm a big fan, right? Like all of my career has been enabled by, it's been on the backs of others and through their support. So if I can be that for other people, then I love it. So yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to say believe. Something you said early on in this conversation that, anytime somebody's thinking about taking the leap, starting the business, starting the podcast, there's always like the fear that, it's going to fail, or that people are going to be like, what the hell is Daniel doing? He started an HR podcast. What? And I feel like once you get over that hump and you just like believe that it'll work out, and if it doesn't, like it's going to be okay. I feel like that's the biggest hump to get over, because people are just so afraid that either it's going to completely fail or people are going to be like thinking about them. But the reality is people have their own shit going on. They're not thinking about you.
One of my favorite quotes about that I've said to so many people lately is, the people that mind don't matter and the people that matter don't mind. Wait, is it that, or am I going to have to do it around the other way? The people that mind, no, the people that, the people that mind don't matter and the people that matter don't mind. So it's like, if someone's like, oh, I can't believe you're doing this, like ridiculous. It's like, are they really that important to your journey and to like, and that's been so true for everything I've done, right? Like the people that are truly your friends and truly, have your back and all that sort of stuff. They're like, cool, like you got this, you're gonna crush it. So yeah, just go for it.
I love that. We have had people tell us that we weren't going to succeed, that this MPL wouldn't be a thing. We've had people steal from us. There's like so many things. And through all of that, all the ups and downs, I was like, Daniel, we got this. We just have to keep our eye on the prize. Everything we want will happen. It's just not going to be easy. It's sometimes, the universe gives you the scrappy way, and, we've taken it. So I'm going to go with dolphins because that's sick. That is just that was a great way to kick us off. And man, it's like why we do this, right? It's for like those moments, at least for me. And so Matt, thank you for being flexible and being willing to experiment with us. We chose a slightly different topic than, we could have talked about compensation and all the things. And so it was a lot of fun digging into some things that we're super passionate about, things that you've been super successful at. And we wish you all the best and continued success.
Thank you. And me for you both as well. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt.
Awesome, guys.
Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Modern People Leader. We really, really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star rating. It would mean the world to us. And connect with us on LinkedIn. We want to know what you think about the show, and you can find links to both of our profiles in the show notes. Thanks again for listening, and see you on the next episode.